Well, dude, listen, I appreciate you doing the show. Rios Architecture, Alex Rios. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you. I'm excited.
We're just looking at these kind of modern homes you do. That one's really interesting, that big one. What project is that?
That one is for an agent in the area. His name's Cam Patel. Um, uh, that house, that's actually one of the houses that gave us a lot of freedom to design. He just basically gave me a program, the amount of square footage, and he gave me unlimited freedom to design. And that one is recently completed. I think the other image I sent you, Tyler, is probably the.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Beautiful. Really, really cool, man. Is that a fun process for you? I mean, I would imagine that kind of creative side of architecture is the cool part, right?
It is. I get excited for really just making the client's vision come to life, seeing their excitement kind of resonates with me. Rarely do I want them to come to me with like, Alex, do whatever you want, because I usually want a lot more guidance, a lot more inspiration from them to make sure you're hitting a home run.
Yeah.
So having the client's excitement resonate is kind of what we look for
Yeah.
sure.
For sure, man. That I would imagine that's a cool part of the job. Part of what an architect does is the kind of, I guess, the drawing and the overall concept. Then you take that to an engineer who actually figures out a way to build what you've provided them. Is that correct?
Generally, yeah. So we have rules of thumb, right? We're not going to do 20-foot cantilevers or something crazy like that. Most of our projects are, under the 2 million to 3 million construction value. So we have a pretty good idea of what spans can be accommodated, what restrictions we have on the structural side, to make the vision come to life. So,
Yeah, it's how did you get into architecture, man? Because you're very young. In my head, when I think of an architect, it's someone who's maybe a bit older.
Yeah.
So how did you get into it?
There's a lot of gray hairs in our industry, and I'm starting to get them. So, but I got into it back in high school. I went to Jesuit here, and I think junior year. Junior year, I was kind of a late bloomer. I was not the best student, and starting to apply for college and realizing, my mom worked really hard growing up to put me through a private school, and I didn't really resonate with me until junior year. Of like how much hard work she had put in to give me that opportunity, and I was like, this would be a waste if I don't, maximize it and make it worthwhile. So junior year, I interned with an architect. I basically Googled professions good at art and math, which were the two subjects I did well in, and I interned with an architect that summer. I was with him for a week, and I just really enjoyed his lifestyle. He had a relative working the front desk, some people working on his designs. He was cutting grass for his church on Sunday. Like, he was on his way out, but he had this flexibility and lifestyle that really appealed to me, as well as the creativity. And so I kind of set my way in going after architecture then.
That's awesome, man. Cool. So you just kind of dug into it, got your degree, and then what did you fall into after you got your actual architecture degree? Is there a association, like for a lawyer, right? You graduate law school, then join the bar. Is it something similar for an architect?
Yeah, there are organizations. One is the most popular one is the American Institute of Architects. I was a member there for several years, and it was really helpful to start because I was with like-minded people, like-minded other students looking to get licensed, and so putting myself in that position around that community, and as part of that, I was on the board for a year trying to set up the study groups.
Oh, cool.
So I just wanted to knock out all the certifications and licenses right away. So, I got that done right away, and I know it was a big stepping stone in the industry to move up in firms and whatnot. So
yeah, you were probably one of the youngest ones there too, right?
I was probably one of the youngest ones in the state to get licensed. I was 28 when I got licensed, and NCARB had like published, which is like another body. They had made like a publication of that. But that was like maybe one of the youngest one licensed, but probably certainly one of the youngest with all the other certifications I had at the time.
That's awesome.
So I was just glad to get it out of the way and focus on like the profession.
Yeah. And then kind of right after that, right? Did you start your own firm immediately or did you work under someone else?
Yeah. So part of getting licensed, you have to work under someone else for a few years. And I did that. I worked at 3 years at Gensler, and then another about a year and a half at Studio Plus. Both were great experiences. Gensler, when I was there, really showed me a lot of technical knowledge. I was there for mostly I worked on a lot of interior design projects, but I mostly was on the architecture side of that. So, and then on the when I worked at Studio Plus, it was more ground up medical office. While I was there, it took about a year after getting licensed to like be comfortable with that leap.
Yeah, that's a big one, right? Because not only are you being an architect, but now you're a business owner. You're responsible for employees and marketing and advertising and growing your business, so that's quite a big leap. So how did you kind of get into your first few deals as a new architect with a new firm?
So I figured when starting, one of the hardest things to start is that you don't really have a portfolio, right? I worked at other firms, but the scale was so different. It's not something I could execute myself, nor had the expertise to. I had a role at those firms, but nothing that can translate to a solo practitioner. So great technical skills, but not the scale that I could market. So the best way for me to market was going like more B2B, more going to contractors, builders, developers, and marketing our services that way. So that I also took some classes at Small Business Development Center. It's there in Channelside. They had a few courses there, and they were inexpensive. They kind of showed me the ropes, and it was just you don't know what you don't know, right? So that kind of gave me the first few steps, and probably the next biggest step after that was I had a small grant through Prospera, and they gave me several options. How do you want to improve your business? One of them was a business plan, and I came to the first meeting with just like 2 pages worth, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty developed, right? And we took that into 30 pages, and that was kind of a surprise to me. Understanding your competition, what's your competitive advantage, what's the pie of the market you're looking to take, how are you going to get business, where are you going to get business, why are you the person to do it? So it kind of touched on all those points, and writing it all out was really eye-opening.
Yeah, that's a hugely important part of the business, right? Is all that preparation and planning. That's the foundation. I feel like there's 2 pieces kind of in business, right? It's that preparation and planning phase, and then there's also hey, we got to go out and get some customers.
Right.
You mentioned most of your business has just simply come from relationships and then kind of B2B and all that. What was kind of your first big project where a customer came to you and said, hey, I'm looking for this type of design, and you move forward? Which was your first one on here?
Oh, on here, well, on my Instagram, you could scroll down to the bottom. One of our, we had a really simple spec home we worked with Vicken Homes on. That I think I started working with him probably a year into the profession. It's a simple craftsman style home, and it's something you see very common. It's well done. It's very common.
Cute. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a simple home.
Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights type vibe. Yeah,
right. This is in Seminole Heights. So we started with those, and this is not. It was like one of those accounts that really helped set up a more detailed process. I kind of find myself focusing on process to make sure clients are happy. Right? There's process in terms of like technology, which was that was probably the biggest thing jumping into the profession, was like how inefficient it was. It took me, when when I was working at, when I started working in the profession, I was shocked about how much time people spent on details that were the same on every project.
Like what kind of details?
Well, like drawing up interior walls, like restrooms, right? You need them on every project, but it's amazing how much time you would spend on that, and also just the process in general. Like, what information do they need versus what information are you kind of like imposing? That's not needed. So
interesting to facilitate that process and maybe make that process move along quicker, so that not only you can work on more customers and clients, but also so the builder, developer, or the end user can kind of move on with the rest of the project.
Right.
So timing on bathrooms, like on that note, as an example, that would be like, oh, well, maybe it should be this size. Maybe we should put it here in the house. Maybe there's just that sort of a conversation happening too often.
No, it was just there was no input from the client, really. We knew what we needed to execute. It just took a long time to draw, because we would draw all these other details that were the same on every project. So I just, when I started working for myself, I was like, okay, I do not want to spend more time drawing this stuff.
Right.
Let me focus on the things that clients want, and only that. Because if I impose, right, if I start doing my own stuff, then they might get unhappy with that too. Right now, you're not giving them the flexibility they may want. So that was important, focusing on only what they want and making sure that's done to the T.
Right. And then on that first project, what's the name of it? Viking Homes?
Yeah.
Viking Homes. So that's a beautiful design, man. How much input is the architect how much are you putting in versus this? In this case, it's a builder developer. Tyler, click on that bottom picture you've got highlighted right there. That's a beautiful design, classic craftsman home. You've got kind of the teeth, kind of the wood siding and some of the brick. And there's a lot of detail in a small house like that I feel like someone's going above and beyond. Obviously, it's the builder's pocketbook, right? How much influence are you having on the actual design of a home?
Yeah, so a lot of builders come to us with a program.
Okay,
I want this many bedrooms, this much square footage, and we go through all the requirements. So like when you're looking for a lot, is it a corner lot? Is it an interior lot? Is it compliant with zoning? Do you have any grand trees? Grand trees are protected. They affect the building footprint. Are you in a flood zone, right? We go through all that stuff. And then, of course, there's the building. What's your max square footage? What's your max heated? What's your max gross? Number of bedrooms, bathrooms, right? You go through the list. And then getting inspiration images. In this case, the builder, Viking, had a good idea of what they wanted to execute. So it's not uncommon for a builder to come to us with a sketch. In this case, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot of back and forth. Usually there is. Showing what works, what doesn't work, what may be a better option. And so we just make improvements from there. Most builders are really focused on just the architecture. Now that we've been more in the profession over the years, or we've been working, we do have interiors now too. So we can get to that higher level of detail.
Got it. And then where would someone come into the mix? Maybe it's an engineer. Maybe it's I don't know if it's the contractor, but as an example, right? These columns on the right, kind of where we're looking at is it's basically the front porch. It's the side front porch. Obviously, this is a design at first, right? Okay, it's brick. You've got some wood paneling. I'm sure there's a structural component underneath that. That's not part of your job, correct? You're the design and architect, but it's the engineer's job that says, hey, we need to have a load bearing column here, right?
Well, we would know that there's a column there, and we've done enough homes to do the engineering ourselves, at least at this scale.
Okay.
When we go to the more complex two-story or three-story, then we certainly get an engineer involved.
Got it. So you guys work in tandem with an engineer, or do you have an in-house engineer at your firm?
We have a pool of engineers that we go to. But as far as we've learned a lot through the years. Again, a single-story home, even 2 stories, we can do ourselves. It's just the more complex homes that we're like, okay.
Interesting.
And especially when you go to the more ultra-modern homes, you'll see a few with large cantilevers and openings and whatnot. We fully engage an engineer to provide that.
Got it. So you approach the engineer, hey, this is what the client and I are kind of looking to do. How do we make this possible?
Right.
Got it. Beautiful, man. So that was kind of your first big project, was working with this builder.
Yeah, it was the first big. It was first big account, and there's so much to learn just in that to have like an account that you can just repeat the same projects is like the iterative process is really good to vet out all the kinks, you know. So we had a few, like a kink here, a kink there. Whether what our first engineers we engaged was more familiar with commercial standards than more residential. So we had to find the team. It was the whole vetting process of finding the right team.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces.
There's a lot of moving pieces, and at this scale, right, we're a 6-person firm. Often you work with other companies that are the same scale. So you want to make sure that they're providing the same level of service that you're projecting or you're promising to the client.
That's awesome, man. And then custom projects. You've had customers come to you directly and say, "Hey, I want to build, a house. I like what you guys do." So they come to you for drawings and stuff like that. We spoke off air about a project you guys had. You guys had a lot listed with Abby up in, I guess it was Riverside Heights area,
Yes.
right? Now that was a project that you were doing on spec, right? You own the lot,
Yeah.
and then you put up a plan to sell. You've engaged with the client, and now they're going to build that home with your drawings, and then potentially select a contractor to build it for them.
Yeah.
Is that how that deal worked?
So we're getting into the development side. We're
Scroll
not
all the way up.
Yeah, we're getting in on the development side. This was our first land purchase. You'll see it I think it's the latest post, or the first post that's pinned there in the middle. So we had a really huge lot. It was I think it was 72 by like 120, and so we did a design.
180.
Oh, 180.
Yeah,
Oh, my
massive
goodness.
lot. Yeah. That's awesome.
And so we wanted to do a modern design, and we kind of combined over the years all the elements of the floor plans that we liked. And so we put that. We were testing the market in a way. We listed in November, so it took a little while. The market was a little mixed at that time, so we put it on the list. It took a little while, but we finally got it sold for asking. So we're pretty happy about that. We're under contract with that owner. We're going to start with them in hopefully a couple months here to do their design.
Beautiful. Now that was the first deal of its kind where your architecture firm actually, owned the lot.
Yeah. That's the first time we acted as a developer.
Do you see yourself doing that more?
I do. Yeah. We're really focusing more. I mean, this was just the right opportunity. We're focusing more on middle housing and rezoning.
Now, middle housing. Describe middle housing.
Middle housing would be rezoning. Or ideally, our position would be rezoning the lot for more density. So it could be 2, 4, 6 townhomes, duplexes, apartments, courtyard villa style arrangement.
Yeah.
So basically anything in between single family and the large scale apartments. It's really missing, and I think it's really missing here in Tampa. And opportunity for that.
I think it's missing here in Tampa, but I also think there's a huge demand, and that's kind of good news, right? I think the government's going to take note and hopefully facilitate some of those upzoning processes, hopefully more quickly. I think the first time I saw you and heard of you was the rezoning you did with the city council on 12 units. Tyler, back out of this and scroll down a little bit. We can pull that up. He's sitting right there, right in the middle. See him standing there? Yeah, click that video. So this was you getting an approval rezone request from city council. That's kind of the first step in that process of doing a middle housing development. What does that process look like from kind of soup to nuts?
Yeah, well, in this case, so we did a rezoning, and with rezoning, there's 2 types. There's Euclidean, and there's PD, plan development, site plan controlled. So Euclidean is just going from one designation to another designation. So RS50 to RM16, right? There's already rules around it. It's a already designated type of zoning, and so that's one way of rezoning. The other way is as a plan development, where the project is site plan controlled. So in this case, we rezoned to get more density, but we went to get a site plan controlled rezoning because of all the trees and variances, and the trees and waivers we were requesting. So when you if you were to do it at Euclidean, you have to comply with all the rules. When you do site plan controlled, you can ask for waivers to have reduced setbacks or take exemption for transportation issues that you might have or parking. That might help you get that extra density that you may not get when you just do a Euclidean rezone.
What do you think the biggest challenge is on these rezonings? I mean, is it trees? Is it location? Why do you think that there's a little bit of setback or hesitation with the local government here?
I think it's a combination of things. One, it's just more complex on the developer side. When you do site plan control rezoning, you have to take into account stormwater, and that's often missed when doing when looking for more density. Often, if you do, there's like two types of rules, right? If you have a site plan, if you have more than 2 units on a site, that site is commercial. It has to go through commercial and you have to account for stormwater and there's more regulation around that. There are differences when it comes to apartments and townhomes. Townhomes are always residential, and then apartments, when it's 3 or more, are commercial. So, being knowledgeable about the rules and what makes what. For example, an unforeseen cost, like let's say you do 3 apartments, you need a sprinkler system for that. Right. So, but if there were townhomes, you wouldn't. Right. So
now, what is the definitional difference, I guess, between townhomes and apartments?
Well, townhomes are sold fee simple, so you own the land. With apartments, it's all one lot, right? And you can stack apartments, you can't stack townhomes. So there's a difference in the development pattern, but there's obviously rules around each that do impact cost. There's also other rules too. Like if you go to, I was speaking to the fire marshal in St. Pete yesterday. They said that any building, I believe any front door greater than 50 feet from the property line would have to be sprinklered. So, for example, there was 2 different types of zonings we were working with the developer on, and they were wanting to do a triplex. I told them, hey, if you do 3 in one building, you're going to need a sprinkler system. So the way to avoid that is by detaching it. So we had to detach it to a certain distance, so where that front door was still in compliance and exempted us from the sprinkler system.
And what kind of a burden are we talking about on the developer? I mean, is it 10,000 or?
It could be more than that. It could certainly be more than that, especially if you're depending on what type. If you have a utility connection and the type of connections that your civil engineer can get. So usually you just need a 13. There's 2 types of sprinklers. 13R, I think, is for apartments, and then there's 13D. And there's cost impacts to each. I couldn't really elaborate on them, but who wouldn't want to save the extra $30K, right?
Of course. Interesting. So is there a way that the local municipality, whether it was a city, county, wherever, do they provide a credit towards that, or is that exclusively on the developer to pay for that sprinkler system?
Exclusively on the developer. Yeah.
Wow. So then there's a clear incentive to avoid that, whatever hookup would be required.
Right.
Wow. So kind of part of the value that you could provide is that knowledge, and say, hey, look, if we change the plans, you can save money this way, that way, whatever. Interesting. Cool. So that specific project, you went before council that got approved. I noticed one of the city councilmen, Lynn Hertak, I think she actually just won re-election, so congrats to her. She mentioned something about how she really appreciated how you kind of kept your townhomes, in kind of the same space as the existing trees and figured out a way to kind of get them maybe around the old trees. Could you pull that project up, Tyler? Which one is that? I'd like to see it. So this was a 12-unit project. Who was the developer on this one?
I don't know if the developer want to be disclosed.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. But I don't think I have an image of this one pulled up. So.
Oh. Well, tell me about it.
Okay, yeah. So it's a 12-unit development with 6 units on each side. And what Lynn was talking about was that we set back the building from the street. And when we started the job, we were trying to use rear alley access, but we found out 3 days before our DRC submission. So like a site plan controlled rezoning goes from, first you do a pre-application meeting, and then after that you submit for DRC review. You go through that 1 or 2 instances. DRC is basically a more formal review than the pre-app. Pre-app is very cursory, making sure that what you're applying for is achievable, and then you go to the DRC, which is a more formal submission, and then public hearing. So 3 days before the DRC, we find out that we can't use the rear alley access. So we had to take out 1 or 2 units to accommodate a central drive aisle, and we pushed back the buildings to accommodate all the grand oaks that were on the property. There was a lot of trees to deal with, and we did in the city's eye and our eyes, we did the best we could to preserve them while providing a modern design. The developer really wanted something special, so that was an important piece of the puzzle too.
Did you ever take a look at that project on the old Kojak's property on Gandy? Did you follow that deal at all?
I don't think so.
So a developer buys the old Kojak's property. You know where I'm talking about, right? The old Kojak barbecue spot on Gandy and Bayshore down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a developer buys it. They have this whole plan they've put together. In the plan, they were going to remove some of those large oak trees. And I can't remember how many units it was. But they got denied by the council, and it screwed up their whole deal, and they fought it, and they lost. They ended up selling it actually to the Caspers. I think Blake Casper is going to build, I don't know yet. We'll kind of TBD on that. But that was an interesting one to me because on one side of it, there's a lot of talk about affordable housing in the public and in the government, right? There's a big push towards affordable housing. One way we can reduce the price level or at least stabilize it is to provide supply. It's basic economics. Everyone understands that. What do you think, kind of from an architecture and your business's perspective, on getting a government to figure out some waiver to remove some of these trees? Maybe you plant new ones, maybe you plant twice as many as you remove, whatever it would be. In order to provide that supply, if we're going to, allow a developer to buy a large piece of property like that, and granted, we're not talking about out in the middle of nowhere. We're talking about in the middle of the city off Gandy. If they can't remove a few trees to provide housing for people, how can we ever combat affordable housing? How can we produce the supply to meet the demand of all these people moving here to Tampa?
So I would probably first start by saying that we do want those trees because it makes the experience. It makes Tampa what it is. So if anything, there would be more waivers or more exceptions granted to preserve them. So if you have a grand tree, okay, well, maybe you can get your front and side setbacks reduced. And they do already have some of those incentives, but with something with a tree, you don't know where it is, it's so hard to be prescriptive. Just give a blind incentive.
In the code, correct. Yeah, right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, interesting. So they actually do have some sort of a program, code, whatever, that actually says, hey, if there's trees, you can increase density in certain areas.
It's not an increase they're not granting you an increase in density to preserve a tree, but they are granting you reduced setbacks. It's roughly 25% reduction. So if you're, 20 feet, you go back down to 15. Side setbacks only get reduced by 1 or 2 feet. So, we are actually working with one builder now who has grand trees on both. He's building a single family. He has 2 grand trees on both sides, and he wants to build a nice, big home, right? But his house is so pinched in the middle because of the protective radius. The protective radius for a grand tree is 20 feet.
And what constitutes a grand tree?
An oak that's 32 inches or larger at the base and is a C9. That's the grading provided by an arborist. C9 or better.
C9, is that the health of the tree?
The health of the tree, right.
Okay. So there is a process that you can remove maybe an old tree, a sick tree, a tree that doesn't meet that criteria of a grand tree.
But it's still challenging in the way that the tree could be on your neighbor's lot and you still have to provide that protection. You still have to be at that 20 feet offset from that tree.
Wow.
And if it's on the property line, you're going to have to get a letter to remove it. So if you have a neighbor who's not on board and you have to have 20 feet off of your side setback, that's a huge huge deal. There are ways around that to, let's say you have a cantilevered footing, so you're not just cutting right through the roots. There are like ways around it, but usually you can't get any closer than like 12 feet or 15 feet.
I would imagine that things would change here pretty soon as more people move here and things become more dense. I think there's definitely creative ways we can figure out, planting new trees, or maybe the city could buy more land for more parks. And, the people need to live in tandem with nature.
Right.
And Tampa's a very uniquely beautiful place because we do have so many grand oak trees. I think it's incredible that you drive around South Tampa and you have these huge trees. It's so pretty. I think Tampa is actually I read some article about how Tampa has the largest tree canopy out of any major city on earth or something like that. So we don't want to lose that. That would be a horrible thing to lose. I think it's an asset. Obviously, it's shade. It keeps the area cooler. It helps with stormwater. Trees drink up a lot of that groundwater. So there's value to the trees. They're also beautiful. They provide, living spaces for other animals and stuff like that. But there's certainly a balance between the two.
Sure. And the city's aware of that. I think the city's doing what they can to be aware of that. But there's also different avenues. That's why some of the rezonings that we're doing right now. There's this one. We're on the second lot we're doing. There was the one we talked about earlier with the single family home that we purchased and we just recently sold. We also just went on our contract for a piece of land that we're going to put a quad on, and we're doing in this case we have to provide a substantial front setback because of 2 grand oaks. It's only 100 by 100 lot, but a tree eating up 20 feet of that is huge. Mm-hmm. And that we have to strategize of where we're putting parking, stormwater. Those things can't go into that area. So, and so we'll be applying for side setback and rear setback waivers to respect those trees.
The case over on, I think it was off West Shore, that developer went in and just basically cleared the entire lot. Did you hear about that a couple years ago? That was a very interesting one.
I think I did hear about it, and then that he cleared it without permission.
Oh, yeah. So the city ended up fining the developer, I think, over $400,000. And then they also, I believe, fined the company that removed the trees another $400,000. This was right after DeSantis signed legislation that said, a local government can't dictate what a property owner can and can't do regarding trees. Again, right, we have beautiful trees here. We need to protect them. So I think Tampa's been kind of on top of that, maybe more than other local municipalities. But I think it's kind of interesting how they have this blanket. Now, is this a blanket tree legislation here in Tampa, or are there certain areas, as an example, like in the urban core, you can remove a tree, but maybe in like Beach Park, you have to leave it? Or is it just blanket across the city, these tree rules?
I think they're blanket.
Okay.
I couldn't say that with certainty because I just don't deal with those ultra larger developments. I'm mostly middle housing and single family. We do have some bigger projects. Our biggest is a 72 unit out in closer to the Orlando area.
Oh, very cool. Do you have pictures of that one?
Well, that one I think was pulled up recently.
Scroll to the top, Tyler. I think it's on his the little button, 72 units right there.
Yeah. So this is a kind of an interesting project. It's targeting affordable housing. They're doing 3 24-unit buildings. This developer has purchased a cold rolled fabrication facility. So everything's going to be pre-manufactured and delivered on site. So the entire building will be cold form steel.
That's like what Wolf Partners is doing, right?
Right.
Something similar to that.
Yeah. So we're like they're doing multiple iterations of this 72 unit project. So we're doing it all over. I wouldn't be surprised if they achieve 1,000 units next year.
Amazing. Now, what's the advantage to that type of construction versus traditional?
There is some time saved during construction, but there's also extra time on the design side. So from an overall timeline perspective, I don't see much of a difference. But I think there's an insurance incentive because you have non-combustible construction, There's, I think your timeline during construction is slightly shorter, so I think that would affect finance as far as any loans that you get during construction. And then I think it's just a better product, right? It's non-combustible. You have all your walls are more properly finished, right? They're more, a flush wall is flush. You're not worried about any bows or whatnot from wood construction.
It's probably interesting too on the actual contractor side, like getting the subs in to finish the job off. I would imagine would be different from your traditional construction. There's probably a lot of subcontractors that aren't used to using those type of materials, or at least finishing on top of that structure.
100%, and that's ultra very true, especially I think when you're doing one-off projects. And with a project like this, there's a lot more scale.
Right.
So I can imagine they'll be using a team that is mobile or whatnot, that is willing to travel, a third halfway across the state to accomplish the project.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, dude. So this was a full-scale apartment. So you're talking fire, you're talking probably a clubhouse of some sort.
Yeah, there will be one I believe in this one doesn't. I think they're having the leasing office off-site.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if that happens down the road. We did change the design a little bit to have a flat roof so that it was in compliance with more zoning regulations. Typically the height limit is 35 feet, so this one was around 42 with a single slope roof. So now we changed it to a flat roof to be in compliance with more zoning districts.
Is that a piece of the business that surprised you going from just getting your architecture degree till now? Just the level of compliance. Like, I don't think people understand there's height limits, there's setbacks, there's so many rules. It's not like, hey, here's a blank piece of land, build whatever you want. Did that surprise you at all?
It didn't surprise me. It just learning the complexity behind it and all the different rules. You would think it'd be from when I was first getting into the industry, okay, have some setbacks and some height restrictions, but it goes into so much more detail, transportation, even the trees we were talking about, right? So stormwater, all those things have a play, and then you have overlay districts and all the different types of zoning, and then you go to another jurisdiction who classifies things completely differently. So I wish people would speak the same language a little bit better, but it's hopefully down the road.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you know a lot about some of those little intricacies in the business. Is that all of that knowledge and expertise in the final decision, in your experience, does that kind of fall on the developer? Is the developer the one that is supposed to know, hey, this is what I can build here? Like, have you found that more, or do you think that they kind of rely on you and your expertise to figure out what can be accomplished on a particular lot?
Most of the time, we definitely want to be engaged. You typically want a drawing to validate that,
because you don't want to waste time. Obviously,
you want to make sure your due diligence is checked off, right? You want to make sure that if you want to achieve more zoning or more density, the future land use is correct. You can actually accommodate the desired number of units with parking, with landscaping, and whatnot. So if someone were to try to get more density or try to rezone, then let's try to get a pre-app scheduled. Let's try to get a site plan done and get that initial feedback to give you the confidence to move forward. There are developers who are familiar with it, but most of them are doing duplexes or they're not going into that commercial side.
That's more of a straightforward process, right? If I buy a RM16 lot, 50 by 100, it's compatible with zoning, a little duplex, right? You kind of can go in and plug and play. I'm sure there's, of course, right, different properties have different challenges and stuff like that. No two pieces of property are exactly the same.
Right. If the current zoning supports it, you should be able to do what your intended use is. Again, there's the Euclidean rezoning, and then there's the site plan controlled. So if you're zone RM16 and you have your site and your lot has the square footage, then obviously have at it. But there are certain properties that are more geared towards more density, right? If you're on a corner lot or you have rear alley access, those are important pieces, just so the front of your yard's not full of cars. Right.
Do you ever pitch that to a client you're working with? Let's say I own a piece of property that's zoned RM16 50 by 100, which would be 2 units, 2 townhouses, presumably. Let's say it was maybe it was a 60 by 100 and it had rear alley access. Would you suggest to a client, hey man, like you might want to look at upzoning this thing?
I wouldn't start by it. I would probably do a little bit of due diligence before even recommending it, right? So what's the development pattern in the area? Are there higher densities nearby? Is there commercial or whatnot nearby to support the increase in density? You can look at zoning maps to kind of get a feel for where you might be. You can also change the future land use too, if you feel confident that if you're next to some future, if you're one block away from a higher level of density and you think you could be supported, then give it a shot.
Is Tampa's appetite pretty strong on upzoning and going from a RM16 to like a PD or something like that?
I've seen a lot of just a PD usually entails more density, and it's not always used for that. Sometimes you have a restriction such as a tree, or you have a pie-shaped lot or something like that. So PDs can be used a number of ways, but it seems like their appetite is on that they are on board for grabbing that density. I've seen a lot of approvals over the past few years.
And PD is planned development,
Yes.
correct? And kind of what is that zoning designation? It sounds like a blanket kind of term.
It is. All it entails is it basically means it's your own zoning.
Oh.
You are enforcing the rules via a site plan. So if someone asks what's your zoning is that drawing.
So
Right.
it's project specific.
It's very project specific. So whatever setbacks you have shown on that site plan are your setbacks that you have to build to. You can't shift that building later down the road.
And PD could be used for both residential and commercial?
Yes, we actually helped one of your previous Kelsey with a PD. She had a site plan. She had to put a single family residence on a non-conforming lot. So the lot didn't meet the zoning regulations, and she via a PD she made it a buildable lot.
Interesting. So that seems like a more straightforward process if you don't have a lot that is kind of it's non-conforming. And what would make a lot non-conforming?
Well, for example, an RS50 lot needs to be 50 feet of frontage, 5,000 square feet. Now, you can have lots that don't meet that are still buildable lots, but there are cases where someone has illegally split the lot. Let's say I buy an RS50 lot and I sell 10 feet of it to someone else. That lot is not buildable, and I think neither would mine be at that point, right? Or if I had 60 feet wide, but it was RS50 and I sold 10%, mine's still buildable, or 10 feet of it, mine's still buildable, the other one isn't. We had another lot, I believe it was on, I think it's on Columbus Drive, where it was a pie-shaped lot, and and did not meet the zoning regulations. The city had to do an extensive search on the property's history to confirm that it was buildable and it wasn't illegally split.
How long does that process usually take?
Usually, I think I believe the city says 15 days, but we've often received feedback a lot sooner.
It's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. In this case, it took all 15.
Yeah,
because they had a hard time finding all that paperwork.
So the process, between going from like an RS50 to PD potentially is only 2 weeks?
Oh, no. So,
or you were talking about just the review?
Well, they were just looking up the paperwork to support that property was not illegally split.
Got it.
Yeah, so that part took 2 weeks. A PD normally takes, if you're super gung-ho, you can probably get it down to five months. More comfortable schedules like 6 to 8 months.
That's kind of tough.
It is.
As a developer, you'd probably want to get creative with the seller, right? Maybe you have a due diligence period or a longer closing. Is that typically what you see?
That's what we try to offer, a longer due diligence period. That way we have enough time to have some initial conversations with the city.
It's probably a balance between getting the seller to understand that and kind of moving forward on the project. I'd imagine the seller of the property just wants their money, and they'd probably rather sell to an end user that can just give me my money in 45 days or 30 days. In your case, on the project that you're doing, is that one going to have to be a zoning change, the lot over in Riverside Heights?
Yeah, so it was sold as one lot. It's already inherently two lots because of the original plat. So we're going to be changing it to four or to not four. Well, we're balancing between 2 duplexes and a quad and 4 townhomes. So we're
This is the one with Abby.
yeah, Abby's well, that one Abby had sold. Well, this was also with Abby. She works with me, and she's also my agent. Yes.
Amazing. So that lot in particular, that was, so you right there on the top, Tyler, the first one that's pinned in the middle. That's the one I'm talking about. Is that the one you're talking about, Alex?
No, this is just a single family. This was a single family house. This was just the right opportunity.
Okay.
It was single family land. We sold it as single family.
Got it. That's the one I was talking about. So you're not doing any zoning changes on that one.
No. It's the other one that it's not photographed, but it's basically approximately 100 by 100 lot in West Tampa, and it has there's a major road on one side and a more like, let's say, residential.
Can you reveal where it is? Or
Yeah,
no?
yeah. 2511 Albany.
Okay, on Albany,
Yeah.
right up here, literally like a few blocks north of here. I've always thought West Tampa was a great area to start to search for some opportunities in.
I think there is. There's already some big projects underway there. There's also reduced parking requirements.
Oh,
So it is an overlay district. So you just have to be cognizant of what design regulations there are, and there's some benefits, right? There's reduced parking.
is that reduced parking? Is that a new benefit that's come up recently?
I don't think it's new. No, I think it's always been there.
That's a big one, right? Parking. I mean, if you can reduce parking, you can increase your density quite a fair amount.
Yeah, especially with middle housing, you have to have surface parking, right? You're not a big project with a garage, right? You can't stack cars, but you can stack units, right? So the parking reduction is huge because now you have more land to build horizontally. So that's a big incentive. Probably the main reason we're able to achieve 4 is because we're only required 4 parking spots.
Ah, interesting. So each unit will have 1 parking space. And will this be an apartment or kind of like a townhouse style?
We're balancing that out. We have one project. We have one avenue of 2 duplexes, and the other is 4 townhomes.
4 townhomes or 2 duplexes. And the duplexes would be separated from one another with parking in the middle, I would assume? Like with units facing each other?
Well, when you deal with the corner lot, your driveway has to be about 40 feet minimum from the corner. You can't have a driveway like right at the corner, right? Because then it's going to cause an accident. So that kind of governs the parking location. We had to put it on one of the sides, and now the 2 units, either the 2 duplexes or the quad, is right on the kind of more on the corner. We had to again push it back a little bit because of the 2 Grand Oaks, and those Grand Oaks are not on. They're on the right of way too. So we have to be really respectful of those.
I had a crazy idea. My idea would be to buy maybe a lot like that, 100 by 100, 10,000 square feet, in an urban environment within the city. West Tampa is a great location and example. What if you just went in and said, I want to build 12 units a building here with ground floor retail and no parking? I'm taking the risk as the developer that the businesses and the people that would live here, they don't want a car. They want a bike, scooter, walk to amenities. They want to live an urban lifestyle. What are the chances if some bold developer bought a piece of property and tried to push through that type of a project?
Well, to have no parking just wouldn't be compliant with any Euclidean zoning, right? There's no zoning that exists out to kind of give you that. You would have to do a plan development.
Yep.
But at that point, the city's going to probably give you a lot of kickback. And furthermore,
Are you sure this is going to work?
Yeah. And then your neighbors can come too. So if your neighbors don't want 10 cars parked in front of their house.
Right. How important is the neighbor issue, right? Because that's a big one. You have to get your neighbors to sign off on the project, correct?
Right. I forget which project it was. I think it was the one on Harbor Island. It was that one, or there was another one nearby. I think it was on Bayshore. I think it was the one on Bayshore where I had showed up to, I believe it was that hearing, and there was probably, usually a hearing's maybe like 50 people. There was probably 200 just waiting to outcry this one development.
Oh, it was probably the health club.
I think it was on the one on Bayshore.
On Bayshore?
I thought it was on Bayshore. I can't remember where it was, but either way,
maybe it was the Stovall house. You picked a good day to go in. if that was the case, because that one got a lot of pushback.
Right. I imagine it's a similar experience to the Stovall. That they had probably another 150 people more than they normally have, and that was the first hearing. So we expected to be there for hours just waiting for it to get done.
Oh my gosh! When neighbors come, is it typically? I mean, this is probably an obvious question, but it's typically people opposing the project. Do you ever get a neighbor that shows up and says, "Hey, I love this thing. Let's push this thing through. I like it for the city. I like it for the neighborhood."
Most people would bring, if anything, the developer will bring letters of support. But there are instances where I've seen people come up and support, and sometimes they're not really related to the project. They're like, they acknowledge the same issues that were, yes, Tampa needs more density. You'll see a few people who are just passionate about the city than they are necessarily about the project itself.
So there's a chance that you would do PD on the example I'm kind of talking about, right? With no parking, with something like you would see in a real city,
right?
In a city like New York,
right? So, well, some of the things that help you achieve it are the less waivers you apply for, right? If you're asking for a ton of waivers, that's going to give you less likely to get approved, because the city's going to find the city gives before city council has starts conversation, they have the city of Tampa gives either finds your project consistent or inconsistent with zoning. So you may be applying for a waiver or two, but they'll still give their overall opinion on whether it's consistent with code or not. You can still get approval regardless, but that's one element to achieve success.
And having happy neighbors helps with that.
100%.
On a project like I'm talking about, if you did have neighborhood support, and you're probably always going to get someone who comes up and says, we don't want the increased traffic and whatever. But let's say you got a lot of neighbor support and they were like, hey, look, West Tampa is a dense area. I want to be able to walk everywhere. Maybe you even get someone that comes in and says, hey, I'm a neighbor. I live kind of in the area, but I'm going to sell my house and move into this project and sell my car. It's the lifestyle I want to live. I mean, is there, I guess the overall question is there a chance something like that could happen in Tampa? You're kind of on the inside of these projects and zoning and compliance with council and all that. Do you think that we'll see a level of density like you could see in a Boston, Philadelphia, like a very, very urban metropolitan city?
There's already so much underway that I wouldn't be surprised that 5 years we're starting to feel that. You drive through Channel Side now, as somebody born and raised here, it looks like a completely different city. Right. So I'm not going to be surprised if we start seeing Ybor in the very similar light in the areas just west of that.
Yeah. Plus, too, there's a lot of money coming in, whether it's a developer or an investor, capital, right, moving into Tampa from some of those larger metros that are used to building those types of projects that could probably foresee Tampa turning into more of a metropolitan city versus a more suburban city. You have like a condo development as an example with like a 15-story parking garage and then a tower on top of it. Tampa to me seems more metropolitan, where the people that are moving here appreciate walkability. Like if you look at Water Street as an example, they have a few buildings at Water Street that have no attached parking. They've got parking garages on one parcel, and then like as an example, Cora, the building Cora. So they don't have parking attached.
Right.
That's just a building attached to the ground. That's kind of the development I'm talking about.
Yeah.
In West Tampa and other areas.
Olympus, the apartment building on Harbor Island, formerly known as Icon, they have the same thing where they lease the parking from an adjacent building. So it's a common pattern. I don't think many people are optimistic about it just because but it's the reality that we deal with too.
That's a real way to build a city, though, isn't it? Because if you keep building projects that have to come with parking, that's incentivizing businesses and other commercial developers to have places that you drive a car to, right? Rather than having, hey, look, if you live here, you don't need a car. Isn't that sort of the appeal of Water Street, is that you don't need a car?
It is, on top of many other reasons. Yeah. The allowing that just acknowledges the organic growth of a city. So if you can lease it, and you anticipate parking to go down in the future, it makes sense for the city to allow that.
Yeah, I feel like there's already a ton of parking downtown. A lot of the garages are usually always empty. I think the fear would be absolute gridlock. I think the fear is if you allow too much development that doesn't include a certain number of parking, you're going to turn into a city that's just pure gridlock, like LA or something like that. But also, if you look at some other cities around the country, I know Minneapolis has done it. I believe Nashville recently did it, where they've eliminated parking minimums in their urban core. I think that's something for Tampa to take a look at as we become more of a metropolitan city. Look at Water Street and then Shaw's development. Once all that's built, like you said, you're talking about a pretty large city, much different from today, and especially much different from the Tampa we grew up in.
Right. And you one of the things I was about to comment, I was like, there isn't much housing there in downtown, but now over the past 5 years, there definitely has been. There's, especially on the north side, you don't see it so much in the central business district, but that opportunity is definitely coming more and more to fruition.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me back to that West Tampa example. I'm just curious to know if that is going to be a more common thing as a lot of these developments get finished and as a lot of people live in Tampa, or is there going to be that person that's moving from, whether it's New York, Chicago, any major city, moving here that is used to that lifestyle? Hey man, I don't want to buy a car. I don't want to pay for the gas and the insurance and the payment and all that. I want to be able to rent a little studio in West Tampa, hop on my bike or scooter, go to the central business district, get my groceries, whatever. Like, I think that there's going to be an increased demand for that type of a consumer tenant. And I think that the city would be smart to start exploring avenues to where projects like that could be built or incentivized without kind of screwing up the current nature of how Tampa operates. We're definitely at a pivotal point in this city, though.
Yeah, I think public transportation is probably the biggest key to do that. At the end of the day, like you can do so much without a car, but there's always just that slight inconvenience that makes all the difference. Or that slight inconvenience over every trip just makes it still worthwhile to have it. So I think overcoming some roadblocks with public transportation is definitely one of them. And in other cities, you're comfortable. I've never used the bus in Tampa, which is like crazy to say, but I've never used the bus in here. But when I go to other cities, it's expected, right?
It's so true. Yeah, we were. I was in Rome on my honeymoon, and we used the actual the underground. They have a subway system there. We used that a lot, and it made me realize it's kind of like a chicken or the egg thing, right? Like, do you go ahead and get the funding, and do you build those projects out, like some sort of a trolley extension or a rail system, whatever that would be here in Tampa? Or do you wait till there is a huge incentive from the public to have that type of a service with these increased developments like we're talking about? I think if you look at the trolley system now, there's already a huge demand to extend it throughout downtown up into the Armature Works, Tampa Heights area. I think if you had some sort of a poll, if we all took a vote,
Right,
that would overwhelmingly get passed in like a referendum of some sort. I think it's a matter of money and demand, but I think both of those things will kind of come as more people move here.
I think so. I think so. I think so too. The trolley just continuing down Franklin all the way to Armature,
amazing,
is so well positioned to do that. So, and who wouldn't want that, especially going all the way? There's so much. There's that other office building that just got built there in Armature Works too.
Yeah,
there's a lot of development just north of Armature. There's a higher future land use there.
Yeah.
So that area should be. I wouldn't be surprised if that takes off as well. Just Riverside Heights, North Tampa.
Well, both of the projects that you've done, I mean, the Viking Homes one that we first talked about,
right,
and I believe the new one on the residential one with Abby on the deep lot. Both of those do not have garages, correct?
So the first one has a porte-cochere.
Right.
Right. This one has arguably a porte-cochere. It is a garage, but it's just not a traditional one.
Right. It's not an enclosed garage,
right,
with
right,
the door and everything. But that kind of speaks to the demand of that area too. That's a more urban area. Maybe the buyer that's going there doesn't necessarily have to have some of those more suburban spread out amenities. I would imagine if a trolley system ran through that neighborhood, why wouldn't that person potentially not even have a vehicle?
Right.
Granted, you probably would,
Right.
but it's just an example, right? That person not having a vehicle, hopping on the trolley and going all the way down to Greenwise and or going to catch a Lightning game or going over to Ybor City, like I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, same. It's I think we're still a ways from it. It's some people still want the car, right? Too,
For sure.
So there's certain neighborhoods that I think will lend itself more, certainly to that increase in density in that community that using that public transportation.
Have you seen the old trolley map from I think it's from the 1930s? Tyler, pull that up real quick. Go to, I believe you could just type in Google, old Tampa trolley map. So the Tampa streetcar system used to run to Sulphur Springs, Seminole Heights. It's all the way on the left, Tyler, all the way top left. So this is from the Tampa Bay History Center, Tampa Streetcar History. This is an old map. I believe it's from right before the trolley was disbanded, and I think it was like the 1940s with the advent of the suburbs and the automobile and all that sort of stuff. But you can see just how extensive Tampa's trolley car was, all the way through East Tampa, all through the downtown core, Ybor City, over to West Tampa, down Bayshore Boulevard, through Hyde Park, all the way to Ballast Point, up to Sulphur Springs. We used to have an extensive rail public transportation system here in Tampa. I would love to see this brought back one day. Obviously, a piece of it was brought back 20 years ago, going from downtown on Franklin Street, like was mentioned, through Ybor. Man, let's just sit here and imagine, let's say tomorrow you could snap your finger and this was built. I believe that some of the developments around these public transportation centers, like you can see on the map, there's a lot of lines through West Tampa, right? West Tampa could be an area of urban growth where you kind of have these urban pockets grow up where maybe there is no parking. Maybe it's like these little pockets of urban areas that are dense, but then you also still have the South Tampa Palmacia Beach Park where people are living in homes and driving cars.
Right, and like I think St. Pete might be like not too far off from this diagram. You see, they just passed some zoning changes there.
Oh,
and some of the increase in density that they're allowing, they're allowing an increase in density for middle housing. And oftentimes they're paired with the new bus system that they have there. I forget the name of it, but you see that increased right along those lines.
Yeah, I think there's a huge incentive for it moving forward. St. Pete's smart to recognize that, and it sounds like they've passed some sort of a legislation that would allow. What is it? It's an upzoning increase?
They have approved an upzoning there in certain corridors.
Yeah,
and St. Pete has several incentives. I don't know them all, but one of them that comes to mind is a 50% increase in density if you provide affordable housing.
Oh, that's a great one.
I don't see too many developers use it just because they don't want that rent cap. But it also depends on what's affordable, right? I'm still trying to get a clear definition on that because I know it's by geography.
I was going to ask you that. What exactly is the definition of affordable? It sounds like it's some sort of a rent cap. It's a number, right?
Right. It's a number, and it's based on based on the neighborhood you're in.
It's kind of difficult to ask a developer, hey, don't rent these apartments for as much money as you could for market value. But then again, if they get a zoning density increase, maybe it could be worth it. I guess that's the balance for the developer to find.
Yeah, it's finding that break-even point, I suppose, right? You're not going to get the same rent. But how does that compare to the build cost?
I think a lot of people forget that it's a business. Like people forget housing is a business. Like there's people that go out and build housing. There's a demand for it. And those people that build housing make money.
Right.
And the government is not in control of our housing.
Right.
So when people stand up and cry about affordable housing, you have to understand it's a private enterprise in this country and you have to respect property rights. And we have to find a balance between those two. That's kind of the tricky part of it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the government incentivizes the things they can't do. And if they can't, they're not providing you housing, but they can incentivize it. They're not generating, new businesses, but they can incentivize it. So.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, Mayor Castor came out and said that she does not support rent control. That's another kind of word being tossed around. I know St. Pete is a little bit more I don't know, they're leaning more towards rent control, but I know Tampa, our mayor has come out and said she opposes it. What's kind of your viewpoint? You have an interesting perspective working with developers. What do they think about rent control, and how could that affect our city?
Well, certainly no developer is gonna want it, but I have seen some developers use it in St. Pete for that middle housing. There are two different types. One is like I think it's like 20% of the renovation cost, and then the other one's maybe 30%. I forget how it works out, but each whichever one you choose depends on how long you have to maintain that affordable rent cap. So the first one might be a 5-year cap on rent. Another one might be 10 years. So I think in city of Tampa it's like 30. So
30-year rent cap?
I think that's what I heard on the last zoning hearing, that to be classified as affordable, for a development, it's around 30 years.
Isn't that kind of ridiculous?
Well, it can be, but that's what's the bonus, right? I don't specialize in that market, but
I see what you're saying though. What's the trade-off for the developer? Hey, if I cap the rent for 30 years, what do I get? Can I build a skyscraper on my lot? Right.
Right.
Well, it would have to be some sort of a huge increase in density if you're going to make a developer cap the rent for 30 years.
Right. And maybe it's maybe not the whole building, right? It's just the added density. So that's the part you have to kind of balance out and crunch the numbers. But again, yeah, most people don't. Most developers haven't really used it.
What's kind of there's a property in Ybor City being developed. It's almost finished up, if not already. It's right next to the 7-Eleven we were kind of talking about before the show. What are the challenges in a development that is directly in an urban area right between two buildings? There's a zero setback line.
Right.
Versus like a single family development. What kind of challenges and what are the differences between those two types of architecture?
Well, for one, certainly acknowledge that in Ybor, an overlay district, there's the architectural review board that's part of that process. Beyond I think I've seen it being built. It looks like right in line with everything else, right? It's a 3-story building. I'm assuming apartments on top or office on top with retail. Oh, it was a cigar lounge.
I think it's a cigar lounge, right. Sterling, I believe, Sterling Cigar Lounge. I don't know if it's going to be the entire building, like a rooftop component or something like that, or I don't know if it includes any residential.
Yeah. I imagine like the structural and civil aspects of the design are especially sensitive especially with dealing with, it's really a separate building next to you, right? You can't attach to it. So we're working on a renovation right across the street from that. And we're taking down a demising wall that's basically two buildings. So our structural engineers, examining both sides to see how each one was built and factoring that in.
And you're dealing with 100-plus-year-old building, right?
Right. And then you're also, especially with Ybor, where a lot of the space above is vacant, you have to still provide fireproofing all the way to the roof. For for example, we're doing a kitchen, right? So any penetrations that go to the roof, we still have to provide a rated separation between what's commercial and what's residential.
I would imagine a project like Shaw is doing, he's kind of dipping into multiple districts, right? Gasworks, he's got, and I believe he might be in the historic area in the northern part, maybe moving into the Channel side, CRA, and then into the CBD. That's got to be a complicated process, because I know in the northern part of the development, he's kind of abiding by the historic look of it, right? He's doing the low 3-4 story type deal, and then towards downtown, he's doing more skyscrapers. That's probably a crazy process. He's probably got a massive firm working on that. With your company, do you have ambitions to ever do large projects, or do you like kind of being boutique and actually being the expert in your smaller space?
Yeah, I would say I like being a boutique. I like the specialty of working in the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County, and we're getting more and more familiar with St. Pete. We have houses all over the state, but that's kind of where our market is. I like the focusing in on that affordable to market housing, and we tend to work with a lot of like-minded people there. Once you get past that to those higher end homes, we do high end homes too, but most of our homes cap out at $2 million, $3 million
right.
construction value. So anything beyond that tends to be a different process. But we tend to we focus in on that. We understand all the rules, whether it's masonry, block, or cold form, however the person wants to build it, and we do that all over the state. So even in Central Florida, we have different kind of service offerings than Tampa, from an architecture perspective.
Do you know who Guy Peterson is?
Yeah, he's a architect in Miami, I think.
Legendary architect. I believe he was out of Sarasota. That's his book, Naked, The Architecture of Guy Peterson. I believe he's been around for 40 plus years. We've sold a few of his properties in Sarasota. Absolutely unbelievable. Some of those are going for $6 plus, $8 million now.
Right.
I believe his fee to sit down with him to draw up plans was $100,000. Do you see dipping into small, like single family space, but at a much higher end? Or do you kind of like?
I like the space that I'm in. I think it's a completely different market at that higher end, and it's not really. There's a certain style and signature that's associated with that style. That's
Right.
That doesn't really lend to our business vision. We want to create the client's vision, not impose our own. And that's not a shot at him, because he obviously has great projects. That's just, if the client's looking for someone else's kind of vision, that's great. But we want to kind of really extract what the goals are and the vision of the client.
Yeah. It becomes its own thing, right? Like someone says, oh, I want to build a Guy Peterson home. I like that modern look. I like that specific type of architecture. So I'm going to go to that architect for that look. Whereas you're serving kind of that wider purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
So if someone, wants a, more craftsman style home, great. If someone wants a modern home, great. Here are the differences. Explain that to them. If they had come with inspiration, like modern to someone, maybe mean something completely different to someone else. Mm-hmm. So we really want to get that guidance from them on like what about these pictures or images is what you're looking for. Then we, of course, as I mentioned before, we have that those instances where the clients just give us your vision.
Right.
Those are also exciting. But I think one of the homes that recently kind of was at that higher end price point, I think it's on the it's the third row on the right. This one just sold for 2.1. A lot of the local agents have been kind of sharing it on social media. Actually, not
that one, bro. Come on.
That was a nice house too, but it's the one just above it, right there with the that one. Yep.
It's a beautiful home.
Yeah,
really cool design. Now, who was the builder on this one?
The builder was Martinez Homes. They just sold it this way. It went on for less than 12 hours, and I think it sold it at asking. So it's a great home. They have an amazing staircase on the inside. It's actually on the MLS, so we can pull that. I don't know if you can pull that up, Tyler, too.
Zillow might work, Realtor.com.
Yeah.
So this was a developer that came to you to build a spec home?
Yes. This is it's 1310 Plymouth.
1310 Plymouth. You could probably just Google that address.
Right.
1310 Plymouth. Beautiful design, man. How deep into the actual design was your firm versus the developer's kind of idea, or did you guys work in tandem?
It's in tandem. The client comes to developer comes to us with a vision, and we work with them to fulfill that vision. So there are definitely some things that it's a back and forth on. This home had a really unique staircase, and I definitely scratched my head a few times trying to get it to fit, but it's definitely a one of a kind home, and I'm not surprised it was off the market so fast.
What an incredible price per square foot for that neighborhood.
Right, I think it was like what, $650 maybe?
608. Well, that's what it was listed for. I don't know if it went pending. Probably went pending at ask, right?
I think so. But I think it was full ask. Yes.
Incredible, beautiful. Look at that staircase. Click that staircase picture, Tyler. Oh my gosh. How cool was that? Now talk about Miami, right? That's like something you would see in Miami.
Right. And that's great point, because I think that's what they're gearing towards on their next future projects. I have another home with them as well. It's still in the preliminary phases, but it's a 6-level home.
Wow.
Yeah.
6 levels.
Yeah.
And it's a home, not a building, not an apartment.
Yeah. I had to get a formal code interpretation to validate that it was a home.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah. It took about 3 to 4 months. I don't know, man. Like my Hispanic side came out, dude. I get hard headed. I was like, I know. I've read the code. It's a 6. It's a compliant. It's under the residential code.
A 6-story home.
Well,
Can you
sixth level.
6th level?
Yeah.
Can you reveal location and some more details?
Well, I can't reveal the location, but other than it's on the water.
It's on the water. Okay, amazing. Gosh, 6th level. So what's the height? What's like the top ceiling height on
I think
that?
it was around 42 or 43 feet. The building height is measured from the flood zone now, as opposed to
Is it really? Holy
so
shit.
if you're on the water, your 35-foot height limit is measured from your DFE design flood elevation.
So potentially from actually water level, you could go way beyond 35 feet. I think on Davis Island, 16 feet is the flood level, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's in I forget what the
Base
term
flood
means.
elevation.
Well, there's a 16 feet NABD, right? That's like I forget that the long breakout of that word is, but acronym is, but that's
Google
like
it, people.
Yeah, that's like the floodplain zone. But your property may be at 6 feet or 10 feet.
Got it.
So understanding that elevation change is part one. If you're in a flood zone and you're at that point, we were like, we won't even start designing it until we have confirmation of where you are in relation to that flood zone. So the survey is really important at that point, at that moment. But that's impacted projects too, because the flood maps changed as we were in for permitting on some projects. So so the first one I showed you, we actually had to raise the home 2 feet above grade, and it changed all the heights. And when you're at the height limit, it could be quite the challenge.
Because that could screw up your entire plan or potentially cost that client or developer a lot of extra money.
Right. So, having that extra space from the grade to the first finished floor, that's part of the 6 levels, right?
Yeah, flood zones are tricky, right? There's kind of an opportunity in a flood zone though. We work with a builder developer down in Sarasota, and what he's done in flood zones typically is just create the entire one story on the bottom as an empty shell that someone could use as like a 5 or 6 car garage,
Right.
Make a hangout space, ping pong table, whatever. Are you seeing more of that in flood zones? People utilizing that kind of ground floor space versus just building the home up with dirt or walls underneath?
Right. So there's different types of flood zones, right? There's a AE, which is probably what people are most commonly see. There's also VE, which is several types of this, but VE is the other most common one, which is a high hazard flood zone. And on those, you have to resist wave action. So you have to be, if you're on the water, really try to find out if you're in AE or VE, because it does impact the construction. When you're in VE, you need breakaway walls or just basically stilts, right? You're kind of limited to those. When you're just in AE, you can have regular walls with flood vents. But going back to your original point, I don't see too much utilization of it, because it just becomes you can't have habitable space down there. You can't finish the space. And the city has really cracked down on that from our recent experience. We can't have they don't even want to see walls. They want everything to be out of columns. So if I had like a load-bearing wall that's supporting something on the 3rd floor, they've asked me to change it to columns and beams. I've had that before, because they don't want the space broken out. They're trying to mitigate what people have often done is just build it out, finish it, air condition it, and they're trying to prevent that. So from the best they can.
Is there some sort of a rule where you can have X, but you can't have Y, meaning like, hey, you can't have a bedroom, but you can have a table with a pool room, a pool table, billiards, whatever?
You can't have any conditioned space down there. So if you want a pool room, have at it, but it's not going to be.
You're going to be sweating your ass off.
Yeah. So there are a few exceptions, like I believe you can have like 100 square foot storage room. I believe you can also have like.
What about a lobby?
You can have like a lobby, like your staircase, and if you have an elevator, I believe that area can be conditioned.
But there's limits on size and that sort of stuff.
Right.
That's kind of a shame. It'd be nice if you can finish off that space, maybe less bedrooms, but at least can you put a bathroom on the ground floor?
If it's not conditioned, I have to double check on that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people want that pool bath, and I
Right.
believe we have accommodated for it, but I'm unsure if it's permitted.
I think me, right? If I'm looking at those rules and regulations, my first thought is like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why the hell can't you do that? It makes way more sense to be able to finish off space. Maybe you're not going to put a bed down there, but at least a bathroom and some extra room for ping pong or whatever by the pool. But then you look at what happened to Fort Myers,
Right.
and you can kind of see the damage that these storms can cause. And God forbid we let people build on all these ground floors all along the coast, and then we get hit by a storm like that, and you have a massive loss of life. So I understand why the regulations are in place. It's crazy how much they changed, though. Like the fact that they changed in between one of your drawings is insane.
Yeah, it changed actually. It's enforceable for everything not approved yet. So we were already in our second round of permitting, and I'm calling the guy, calling the plan reviewer a week in advance. I'm calling him like every other day, like review the drawing,
Yeah.
review the drawing, review the drawing, and he reviewed it the day after, and I was like, you got to stay friends with these guys, so.
How much of it is kind of an old boy, like, I know the plan reviewer, I can get this done better than this other architect or whatever?
It's kind of hard to say it as like a bragging right or like as a quantifiable business advantage. I mean, it is there.
Yeah.
I know people at the city of Tampa, they know me well. We've done plenty of homes through the city of Tampa. So there's a familiarity. I would say the familiarity is more with just what you know about the zoning regulations.
Right.
It's not like I'm buddy with somebody, right, at the city. It's not like I'm getting any special treatment. But it is good to be on a first name basis and have that history, that rapport, just to, they'll likely give you more attention, right? And try to help you out if you have that rapport. Oftentimes the city only deals with, in certain cases, only deals with the licensed professional. They're not going to really entertain comments from the owner, from the builder, if it's a technical question. If it's a technical question, hire the technical design team to do
Right.
it. So
I wanted to talk to you about the Jackson House. The Jackson House is an old historic building downtown. It's a part of our Black history, not only here in Tampa, but just nationally and worldwide. I think Martin Luther King has stayed there. Ray Charles has stayed there. It's an old rooming house. During the segregation times, this is where prominent Black entertainers stayed. It's a really cool part of American history. Unfortunately, it's falling apart. It's in very bad shape. It's been neglected for a long time. They do have a lot of funding for it. I know Venick has donated $1 million towards the cause. They've been raising money to renovate it. So there's a system and a project in place to restore it, but it's to a point where they either have to bulldoze it and figure out a way to kind of rebuild it in a way that would speak to the old Jackson House, or effort to try to save it. That effort was stalled by 717 Parking, who owns the property that is surrounding the Jackson House. Last I heard, they needed a 10-foot easement on either side to accommodate the new fire code. And 717 would not give them the 10 feet, or I believe they wouldn't sell it to them either. From an architectural standpoint, pull up that Tyler picture, the really, really bad one, top right. When you look at that, Alex, I would imagine that thing can't even be saved. Obviously, the goal is to save it. Mm-hmm. We kind of talked a little bit about Ybor City and some of those structures. You're kind of dealing with that right now with old buildings. What is the feasibility of saving the Jackson House, looking at it?
Yeah, I've driven by it several times. I'm relatively familiar with that house. I don't know all the restrictions around the fire issue, but when you deal with a historic home, you understand there has to be accommodation, right? There has to be accommodation to the rules sometimes, and while the 10-foot is certainly warranted, right? It's needed to protect the building. There may be other ways to provide the same level of safety as deemed appropriate by the fire marshal, right, to accomplish that goal. So whether that's in installing some type of sprinkler system or having some type of rated barrier separating the building from what 717 could build, I think there's like maybe another means of achieving that goal, similar to what you would do for a plan development site controlled rezoning, right? If you don't meet a certain requirement, here's the waiver for it. This is our means of accommodating to substitute that rule with another.
I guess kind of the question becomes too, at what point is it just a new structure? Looking at the Jackson house right now, you're going to have to replace the roof, windows, all the wood,
Right.
clearly the structure. At what point are you just rebuilding it anyway? And so maybe that should just be the new solution.
You are basically rebuilding it.
Yeah.
There's a house that I recently worked on that was historic on 7th Avenue, kind of closer to Armature Works. It had suffered a fire, and everything on the inside's charred, right? But because it's a historic building, we have to build it back in place. The character of the home has to be there. So this structure, whether it's reconstructed or rebuilt, it would have to be built back into the same character to fall in compliance with the historic guidelines.
They've added, Tyler, if you could pull up, if you just Google that, so if you hit all instead of images, you can pull up the old article about this most recent kind of tiff between 717. I think it's right there. Effort to save Tampa's historic Jackson house stalled by neighbors, Tampa Bay Times, August 19th, 2022, last summer. That's an older picture. Keep going. Oh, it's a subscription article. Damn it, we hit a paywall. So look, they've secured more than $2 million in financing for the cause. Clearly, they have enough money. It's only a 4,000 square foot structure.
Right.
So there is enough funding there to accomplish what they need to accomplish. From like an architectural, I guess it might be even an engineering question. How would you put something like that back together? It's clearly possible if they've gone through the planning and they've identified, hey, we need the 10 feet. They clearly have a plan in place.
Right.
You mentioned there could be another way to do it. Is that, have you gone through a historic zoning structure before versus a new construction? Like, what's the difference between it? Hey, this property is historic, and hey, this one is not.
Right. So, well, there's two distinctions. There's like the National Registry of Historic Homes, which doesn't really translate to much. It's just on the National Registry. A lot of people, we've had community input, not in our favor, saying that, the home's in a historic district, the National Registry, but that doesn't really resonate with the city of Tampa. It doesn't. It's not their local historic homes, right? Those ones are the ones that are protected, and there are maps of those homes. Even sometimes the accessory structure is protected as well, especially in Hyde Park. You see that. So with the historic home, you're going to have to rebuild it back in place. So when you say rezone, you're really rezoning just to accommodate the existing building. Oftentimes it's almost certainly not into compliance with current code.
Right.
And you're, especially if it's like a commercial building, a lot of these buildings are larger. Right, they're often not single family. They might be multifamily. They might be used as office. So you have to accommodate those extra regulations on your site. So are you going to provide a 20 or 24 foot drive aisle for your cars, plus 90-degree parking, plus stormwater and landscaping? You're usually not going to have enough space to accommodate that. So your site plan rezoning, site plan control rezoning, is going to be likely geared towards reducing your green space requirements and your parking reduction, and maybe even a setback reduction if the building is too close to the property line.
And why would a building like that need? It says right there, $4 million. You've seen that figure. There's $2 million they've raised. Why would it cost millions and millions of dollars to replace a structure that? I mean, man, it doesn't look like it would cost $4 million.
I don't think I don't think it looks like it costs that much, and I kind of doubt it would, the full $4 million. But there's probably so much more to it than the building itself to make it functional. I imagine all the finishes on the inside have to tell a story of that time, right? And there's so much. Yeah, there's probably way more beyond just the shell of the building itself that's going to add to that value.
Yeah. The project One Tampa, the new condominium by Coulter downtown, right across from Curtis Hickson Park. They bulldozed where the First Watch used to be downtown, that beautiful old historic building. They bulldozed that thing. Why? I mean, it sounds like it's more expensive to renovate and bring up to code an old building than it is scraping it and just building brand new. Is that true?
It tends to be quite expensive, right? So like I actually just visited a building in what was it? I think it was in Clearwater. I'm forgetting the name, but the third floor didn't have a staircase. It only had one, right? And a space that large would need another one, right?
Oh shoot.
So there's not proper insulation. The bones of the building are often okay, but if you're changing the use, like if you go from like, a residential to storage, right? Your floors are now supposed to carry a higher load than they are residential, right? So you have to accommodate for all that. And whether or not the building sprinkler tends to be another item to address too. Sometimes some spaces in EBOR, I think some spaces in EBOR may not be sprinklered, so you just have to accommodate that.
It's kind of a shame. So it's are there exceptions in the code? Hey, this is a historic building. You don't have to abide by the current rules.
Fire protection tends to be its own. The fire marshal tends to have their own review, but they're often you just don't see that often. Usually, a historic consultant is engaged, and they can kind of navigate through those challenges. Like most of these historic buildings don't have ADA access, right? So, can you accommodate it via lift, via chairlift? How are you going to accommodate restrooms? How are you going to accommodate access to the second, maybe third level? So there has to be there are protections to maintain the building, but at the end of the day, they're prescriptive. So you may have to ask for waivers where you can.
So from a developer standpoint, it's so much more of a headache to add in and to recreate the historic structure versus, hey man, we're just going to bulldoze it and build a new condo tower. Especially like culture, that's their bread and butter. They're not necessarily like a historic renovating focused company.
I mean, it's an entirely different development to maintain that building for what they were going to build wouldn't really be feasible.
Pull that up, Tyler, real quick. Just type in Google one Tampa condo. What's interesting about that is they did bulldoze the old historic structure, but they're kind of rebuilding the old facade into the new condo, rebuilding it. I don't know if they're repurposing the old brick or anything like that, but they're rebuilding the look. You can pull it up right there, Tyler. Look at the Business Journal picture right there. Yep. Look at that, man. That's really cool. How they've rebuilt that old look, the facade, into the new building. I think it's genius. I think it's a great way that the developer can say, hey, we're sorry about bulldozing this old building, but we're going to incorporate it in the new design.
Yeah, I love to see the plans of this building. It looks like from that image, I can't tell if there's parking behind that old brick building, but I've seen projects, I think it may be in Miami, where you see cars parked behind windows. It looks kind of a cool, interesting design element, but
I think it's genius.
Yeah, but you could see those like levels just to the right of the building. It kind of suggests there's parking there, but maybe it isn't. Who knows? Maybe it might be office space, but
I would imagine it would be parking.
Yeah, I mean they need parking somewhere. I hope.
Yeah, they got to have it somewhere. Yeah, it's a shame when you see that, but kind of like you're saying, what's the alternative? The building's going to sit there and then fall in the middle of the road, and then we're going to have an even bigger issue. So it's kind of cool that they're building it into the design.
Yeah, the way they've treated the architectural around it is pretty interesting.
Look at that. How cool is that, man? Beautiful. Well, listen, Alex, man, it's been almost 2 hours, if you can believe it.
Really?
Crazy.
Oh, wow.
What are we at, Tyler? Hour half.
Okay.
Hour 40. Goes by like that, right? Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, dude, listen, I really appreciate you doing the show.
Awesome.
I learned a shitload. I had no idea architecture and development was so involved. It's not just as simple as, hey man, build me a house.
It never is. But I think we have some great clients. We've really nailed down the process, and we're excited to keep growing with the city.
Well, such a young firm, you're so knowledgeable. I'm really impressed by everything you know about zoning and uses and architecture, and it's really cool to see, man. If people want to get a hold of you and reach out to you for your business, how can they find you?
So we have the Instagram page, Rios_architecture. Our website is riosarchitecture.com, and you have my cell, 813-727-2101. I use my cell for all work. So
beautiful. All right. Well, Alex, man, again, I appreciate it.
Awesome, man.
All righty. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.